ग्रुप में एक और बार बोल दो।
बोल दे रहे हम।
ठीक है, the class is being recorded. Okay, so first let us know something about Dibyendu Palit. Okay, Dibyendu Palit, this story what we are going to read today is Alam's own house, and this man Dibyendu Palit was born in 1939 and he died in 2019. So very much a modern prose writer, a storyteller rather. Dibyendu Palit is a very good storyteller. And Dibyendu Palit was born in 1939. That means he would have at least 11 years, or rather, if we think that in 47 partition, so he would have been 8 years old. Mm, His first story, Chhandopoton, it was published in 1955, Anandabajare's Sunday edition. Okay, and some good stories are rather কিছু ভালো বই ওনার লেখা যদি বলি, শীতগ্রীষ্মের স্মৃতি, সিন্ধু বারবা ঢেউ, সম্পর্ক, সহযোদ্ধা, stories যদি বলি, you have to remember these are all Bengali names because Dibyendu Palit was essentially a Bengali writer, like মুখগুলি, মুখাভিনয়, শুক্রে শনি, চিলেকোঠা, আলমের নিজের বাড়ি। আলমের নিজের বাড়ি দিব্যেন্দু পালিতের সেরা গল্পগুলোর মধ্যে একটা অ্যান্ড ফর ইউর ইনফরমেশন 1984 আনন্দ পুরস্কার, 1990 বঙ্কিম পুরস্কার অ্যান্ড দ্য মোস্ট প্রেস্টিজিয়াস অ্যাওয়ার্ড ইন বেঙ্গল, দ্যাট ইজ সাহিত্য একাডেমি অ্যাওয়ার্ড 1998, এগুলো কিন্তু দিব্যেন্দু পালিত পেয়েছেন। সো you can know that this man was really a man. Even he has written so many novels, like Antarthan, Oboidho, অনুসরণ, স্বপ্নের ভিতর, ঢেউ, সহযোদ্ধা, সবুজ গন্ধ, একা, বৃষ্টির পরে, বিনিদ্র. All these are some good novels by Dibyendu Palit. He is a modern storyteller, and therefore you can know that born in 1939, he would have started writing during 1959, at least at the age of 20, if we think. So ওই 59 এর পর থেকে লিখছে, and 59 কোথায়, 55 his first story চাপতান, ছন্দপতন 55. That means when he is writing, যে সময় দাঁড়িয়ে লিখছে, at that time it was evident that a thing like partition will reflect in his stories. But what type of partition? You can understand that for Dibyendu Palit, like one thing I must tell, that Palit didn't have to practically migrate because he was born in Bhagalpur, Bihar, in British India. Okay, and later they shifted in Kolkata, Goriahat. Palit used to study in Jadavpur University, comparative literature. Okay, so এগুলো দেখে বুঝতে পারছি যে পালিত কিন্তু নিজে কোনোদিন practically personally he didn't have to migrate, and he watched partition rather I would say from outside, and uh, you can understand that his story therefore why is not a direct impact of partition, because for him partition was an experience that was quite, I would say, passive. What is the difference between active and passive? Because he was practically not in the middle of the whole process. Born in Bhagalpur and then shifted in Kolkata, studying in Jadavpur University, we can understand from his life that partition never did really affect his living or affect his mental condition directly. It was a kind of passive effect, and that's why when you study Manik Bandyopadhyay, when you study uh, the final solution, while you see the victim is directly in the middle of the six and nines, in the topsy turviness of the whole situation, in the hurly burly of the whole situation, and she's trying to find a way out, trying to make everything get settled. We do not find such thing in Palit's stories. In this regard, I would like to refer to a famous essay. The pathetic thing is that while I teach about Bengal partition, most of the works have been done in Bengali, and therefore I would like to, or I have to refer to some Bengali writings here. This writing was in Ujabor. I had told you that if you can, you may please find this book and you may go through it. If you cannot, when I will be available in Mankor, I can give you the book. But it is a Bengali. That is the very problem. And I do not know এখানে দাঁড়িয়ে খালি বোধ হয় অনুপম, তাজিবুল, সঞ্চিতা, তুহিনা, এই চারজন। আর তোদের ব্যাচে অনেকেই আছে, ইউ ক্যান নট রিড বেঙ্গলি লেটার্স, বাংলা বলতে পারবি, শুনতে পারবি, বাট বিশাল, স্বাতি, ক্যান ইউ রিড বেঙ্গলি লেটার্স?
Yes, sir.
You can read Bengali letters. Good. Swati, can
थोड़ा
you?
बहुत आता है।
स्वाति कहाँ पे गया? वो गुम हो गया बेटी। चलो, रास्ते में है। अच्छा, अभी
ये भी
जो
रास्ते
हम
में।
अभी रास्ते में है। और बाकी सारे क्या कर रहे हैं? बाकी सारे सब
पता नहीं सर, कोई आइडिया
पता
नहीं
नहीं,
है।
कोई आइडिया नहीं है। चलो, ठीक है। अभी बोल दे दो मुझे, ये जो ऐसे है, ये दिस ऐसे वाज रिटन बाय मदन कुमार मंडल and no, not Mohan Kumar Mondol. It was written by Borenduda. Borenduda is teaching in Jadavpur University, and there is a say partition বা দেশভাগের সাহিত্য আমরা কিভাবে পড়বো, that means how to study partition literature. There he presents a very nice observation. When you read the partition literature, you find that these are majorly of two types. You can listen to me now.
Yes,
Hello.
sir. Yes,
Am
sir.
I-
Yes, sir, सुन पा रहे।
Okay. So the thing is that you can find two types of literature. One which has been written during the turmoil and which speaks of the direct experience of the victim, and another which has been written after the turmoil, and the turmoil is in the memory, and we are dealing with the after effect of the turmoil. So there are these two types. One which directly makes the victim standing amidst the turmoil that just happened around 47 till during the riots, একদম ওই সময় দাঁড়িয়ে যেটা হয়েছে। অ্যান্ড আর একটা হচ্ছে 10 বছর 15 বছর পরে, যখন অবস্থাটা আগের থেকে স্বাভাবিক, সেই সময় দাঁড়িয়ে ওই জিনিসটাকে মনে করা বা ওটার এফেক্ট গুলো নিয়ে ডিল করা। And there, Borenduda makes a nice observation. Borenduda says that if you are in the middle of the turmoil, or any author who is directly experiencing the turmoil and directly writing about it, your thought process gets affected. How? Like, you are struggling. এই যে ধর তোরা গতকাল কলেজে খাতা জমা, এই ফর্ম ফিল আপ করতে গেছিস, তাই তো? অ্যান্ড we had always said that এটা যদি না যেতে হতো তোদের ভালো হতো। And there so many of them probably যখন তোরা বাসে করে গেছিস বা বাস পাসনি, ট্রেনে করে গেছিস বা ট্রেন পাসনি, you people seem to have been angry যে কেন ডাকা হয়েছে, কেন ডাকা হয়েছে, কেন কি হয়েছে, না হলেই তো ভালো হতো। Possibly you would have given, most of them would have given the blame on the college authority. But after a week or two, you will be able to realize that the college had nothing to do with it. The college had always wanted you people not to come out of your house. And that's why we are continuously taking online classes. We are continuously providing you people with notes and regularly getting connected with you, regularly taking your news about your mental as well as academic condition. So you will realize that practically the college is in your side, but at some point the college could not do anything because there is an upper authority. But think that yesterday हम लोगों को ये करना पड़ रहा है। Okay, am I you can listen to me?
सर बीच में थोड़ा सा आवाज कट गया आपका।
बीच में थोड़ा सा, अच्छा ठीक है। So समझ में आया जो बोला?
हाँ बोल रहे थे उसका, फिर कॉलेज बोल रहे थे वहां से आवाज कट गया थोड़ा सा।
तो college had said that for how long? For a minute or just for a brief?
सर थोड़ा सा वही 10-15 सेकंड।
Okay, so the thing is that what I wanted to mean is that that the college is your side, but you will need time to realize that. That you will understand that the college have to answer to the university, and the university have to answer to the government. The government have to answer to the education ministry. So therefore, if the college want to be there in your side, there are limitations. अभी 6 सेमेस्टर का जो एग्जाम लिया गया, कुछ कुछ कॉलेज में 2:30 के बाद जो भी जमा करने गया उन लोगों का खाता जमा नहीं किया गया. They were not allowed to submit their script after 2:30 because that time was mentioned in the university circular. But we had allowed students to submit their paper till 3:34. We were there till 4:30. People were there in the college, and the students were still standing in the queue, or they were coming. They had informed the college that they are on the road. So we waited for everyone to come and submit peacefully. So you have to take time, you have to be given time to take this into consideration. But yesterday, your initial feeling was the college authority is rough with us, they are bringing us out of the home. How can we manage to go there? Yeah, I know there are certain problems, both economical problems as well as transport problems. যাদের পয়সা আছে তারাও সবসময় গাড়ি পেয়েছে সেটা নেই, আর বিশাল পয়সা খরচা করে অনেককে আসতে হচ্ছে। সবাই যে বাসে বা বাস অ্যাভেল করাটাও মানে বাসে আসাটা এখন খুব রিস্কি। সো আইদার ইউ হ্যাভ টু টেক দ্য রিস্ক অফ ইউর লাইফ অর দ্য রিস্ক অফ ইউর মানি। But we never wanted that. We never wanted that. We had always advised the university to open an online portal for this kind of information. But the university didn't agree because, on the other hand, the university had to answer to someone else. So, these things, these realizations. Now, let me come and relate this with a time of turmoil. That when you are in the midst of the hurly-burly, your realization of the situation is not perfect. That is what Borenduda says. That it gets biased because a man or a woman or a person, if a human being, is always biased regarding his self. So when you are in the turmoil, your realization about the situation is not perfect. And when you recollect it from your memory, You have passed the days of the hurdy-gurdy, and you recollect it from your memory. You can understand that now you can judge it from your experience as a whole. Because, another thing in this respect, I'd like to say that's why you find that while you read the final solution, there are only experiences, there are only incidents, one after another, but there was no looking back, or there was no contemplation over what one was doing, no thought of the author or the character as well. There were only events, one after another, happening, just taking place as a result of one another, considerations, harsh decisions. But while you read this story, the incident, or rather, while you read Alam's own house, you will find that the story is very different from final solution in its speed, in its texture, in the context it want to. Rather, the same partition has been narrated as a context, but you will find that the texture, the flavor of the same thing is very different. And that's where one theory comes into use, that is new historicism. Like, what is new historicism? When you read this type of stories where a context comes into consideration at a different point of time, different from when it happened, and then again you read about it after another 30 years. So you have to think, when you judge this text, you have to think about certain things. What are the things? Like, I would say, mm, like, when you read about this text, when you consider about the experience that is narrated in the text, can you just read it with the help of this literary text only? No. You have to understand the context, the time, not in which it was written, or also the time it was representing, the context it was representing. Palit, it's a very, very, this thing makes the story, the structure of the story, very complex. Palit was writing Alam's own house at least during 1960s, I would say, and he was narrating a context, or he was narrating it as an effect of the context that happened during 1947 and years after that. That is partition. So, a very non-literary context is the background of the story. And when you consider partition, do you judge it only with the information that you get from this text? No. You judge partition from historical narratives, you judge partition from other texts, you judge partition from the interviews of the people, you judge partition from the people around you speaks about it, you judge partition from the movies you watch. So while you are reading a text, you are reading a text, you do not only depend on the text, or you can not only depend on what the text tells you only. No, you have to judge the context on which it was being written. And if you think about the context, একদম বরেন্দ্রদার ডিসকাশনটা ধরেই আমি বলছি, do you think that in 1947 the way people thought about partition in the 1960s, people thought about it in the same way? Or when you are reading about partition, people think about partition in the same way? No. The thing was that the 1947 people directly experienced partition when Palit was only 8 years old. So those people who were adult at that time, they were the first generation. In the very first class, I talked about the post memory. And Palit was the second generation. And you people who are reading about it, they are the third generation, and your memory is not of direct impact of partition. You only form your concept of partition from the sources you find around. হ্যাঁ তুহিনা, কিছু বলছিস? তুহিনা, হ্যাঁ কি বলছিস?
স্যার শুনতে পেলাম না, কেটে গেল। আমার নেটওয়ার্ক প্রবলেম না আপনার, বুঝতে পারছি না।
আমার কথা কি বাকিরা শুনতে পাচ্ছিস বিশাল?
हाँ सर सुन पा रहे प्रॉपर्ली।
আচ্ছা তুহিনা, তোর কথাটা একটু কেটে কেটে যাচ্ছে মা, তোর একটু বোধহয় শুনতে প্রবলেম হচ্ছে, বাট আই এম রেকর্ডিং দ্য ক্লাস, সো দেয়ারফর ইউ উইল অলওয়েজ বি এবল টু লিসেন টু দ্য ফুল থিং। ওকে, টেনশন করিস না, ঠিক আছে? টেনশন করিস না। আচ্ছা, আর আরেকটা ব্যাপার যেটা বলছি, সো থিঙ্ক অ্যাবাউট দিস, যে জায়গাটা ছিলাম, যে you people, whatever you think about partition, you form the concept from the sources you find, the people around you, the literary text, the non-literary things, like যেটা বললাম তোদের আশেপাশে বাড়ির লোকেরা, বাবা মা যেভাবে বলছে, the family, the friends, and then the movies. So there are literary sources, there are non-literary sources, and these things are to be taken into considerations. That so what are the considerations when you read these types of text? The first thing, the context of the text, and think about it because it is very interesting. The way Manik Bandyopadhyay narrates the context of partition in the final solution, and the way Dibyendu Palit deals with the same context of partition in his Alam's own house is very different. So even that is new historicism. What is history, or what is historicism? Historicism বলে দেয় যে এইখানে ইতিহাস একটা টাইমে দিস ইজ আ স্ট্যান্ড স্টিল থিং, এই মোমেন্টে এটাই হয়েছে। বাট নিউ হিস্টোরিসিজম বলছে না, the flavor changes, the flavor changes, it is very volatile, it is very living, it is continuously evolving. Okay, so that's why the way Manik Bandyopadhyay sees it, Dibyendu Palit doesn't see it in the very same way, because his memory, Manik Bandyopadhyay's memory, is a direct memory of the context, whereas Palit's memory is not a direct memory. Palit was very immature or juvenile when partition happened, and probably his concept was directly from the elders. Okay, and if we think about you people who are reading the stories, yours are doubly redoubled passive memory, because Palit directly heard from those who had experienced it, and you heard from those who have heard from someone else. So that is the question, and that's how you know your judgment, your thought, your connection with the situation, how can you relate yourself with the situation, changes. And that's why you cannot say that history is something that is permanent. The flavor changes according to your reception, how you receive it, the way you read history, the way you read a text, and you try to read the time from the text is practically depends on two things: the way it has been narrated and the way it has been received. And এই ন্যারেটিভের জায়গাটায় আবার দুটো প্রবলেম আছে। এক, তুমি যদি ডাইরেক্ট এক্সপিরিয়েন্স ন্যারেট করো সেটার একরকম নারেশন হবে, তুমি যদি তোমার মেমোরিটাকে ন্যারেট করো সেটার আর এক রকম এক্সপিরিয়েন্স হবে। So, while Manik Bandyopadhyay is dealing with the direct narrative of the event, direct narrative from the core of the situation, Palit is dealing with memory. Palit is dealing with memory. And obviously, there are class considerations. I am coming to that later. While these two texts are very different, because there are class considerations also. While we are reading about these people who were practically the lower class of the people, the subalterns rather, যাদেরকে মেইন স্ট্রিম সোসাইটিতে কোনো চান্সই দেওয়া হয় না, সেই লোকগুলোর কথা যখন পড়ছি, who are outside the piece of the cake, who are outside the piece of the cake that is called social rights, তার বাইরে যে লোকগুলো, তাদের এক্সপিরিয়েন্স খুব ড্রাস্টিক, তাদের স্ট্রাগল ফর এক্সিস্টেন্সটা মারাত্মক, রাশ, I say pathetic, বাট যাদের টাকা পয়সা ছিল তারা তো প্রপার্টি এক্সচেঞ্জ করে ফেলেছে 1947-এর আগে বা 1947-এর পরে, নিজের মতো বড়লোক কাউকে দেখে, এদিকের মুসলিম কেউ সেই রকম বড়লোক কাউকে দেখে তার বাড়িতে এসে অধিককার হিন্দুরা থেকেছে, আর সেই মুসলিমটা ওইদিকে ঢাকা বা বাংলাদেশের অন্যান্য জায়গায় গিয়ে সেই বড়লোক হিন্দুটির বাড়ি দখল করেছে, একই রকম ভাবে প্রপার্টি এক্সচেঞ্জের মধ্যে। সো when you read about Alam, you find that the experience is different because of the class. So again, a kind of Marxist reading, that your understanding of the class changes your experience. And again, the history comes to you from a different perspective. That is new historicism, আমরা এক ফ্লেভার দিয়ে কোনো একটা সময়কে জাজ করতে পারবো না। History is volatile, history is leaving. The understanding of the same event comes to you very differently. The understanding of the same event comes to you very differently. While you read Alam's Own House, you never find all this type of subaltern experience will haunt you. No, you will never find that. But when you read Final Solution, all the subaltern experiences and poverty, harshness, pathetic situation of the women, they will come and haunt you. While you read Alam's Own House, you find a romantic sadism. I not say sadism, but a romantic elegy. I would say elegy is literature of sadness, grief. The grief that is rendered by Alam's experiences are very romantic, and these people, the subalterns in Final Solution, they had no time to rejuvenate, to relive the whole thing romantically. They needed to struggle to survive. Whereas Alam and what is the name of this woman, Raka, they had time to fall in love, think about relationship. And you can find that in Final Solution, the mother said, no, I have no time to think about other relations. Only I need that my family lives, or at least the baby lives. So there are considerations about Raka, what she should do, what she should not, that these people should not have. So the thing is that I want to tell is the same historical events that come in a very different way. So two things I had said you today. The two things are very important while reading these stories. One thing is the memory and the direct experience. দুটোর মধ্যে একটা পার্থক্য আছে। While you think about the memory, it is much less, I would say, hostile, much less hostile, much soothing, much reflecting, but while you think about the experience, it is coming one after another like bullet shots. Da 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 da. Okay, so this is the difference, this is the difference that you have to understand while you take this thing into consideration, while you take this thing. So while we read the story, you have to keep in mind the concept of memory and post memory and experience, the formation of experience through memories. All often our own memories are not our own experiences. Okay, we form our memory from others' experiences. Like if you recollect that your grandmother has said you, narrated you how she had lived in her village, that is also a part of your memory. But the experience is not yours. Your experience is recollecting the stories of the grandmother. So for Raka or I would say for Palit, partition was this type of experience, a secondary experience rather than a direct narrative. And in Raka or in uh, rather Alam, we can find the same thing, when they had left their houses, probably they were the secondary generation of partition. Or rather, they missed the topsy turvy thing, they had the way, that's where comes the class concept, that's where class the class concept, and from there comes the difference of experience that the class gives you, and from there comes the consideration of new historicism, that you cannot just give certain features to a time and judge the time from that point of view. No, there are certain elements that are to be considered, like your class, your belongings, yeah, and at a very point of time can be represented from different angles according to your class, according to your breadth, according to your situation, according to your position in the context. On the other hand, reception, now comes to the question of receptions. Mm, when you are reading the story, obviously, the way a person whose family have been victimized during partition, the way he will receive it, Vishal or Swati or Tuhina or Shunchita or Tajibul or Anupam, if any of your ancestors have not been a victim of partition, you will not receive it likewise. Or, like if Palit has written the thing in 1960s, সেই সময় বসে সিক্সটিজের লোকেরা যেভাবে রিসিভ করবে জিনিসটা, যাদের একটা জেনারেশন আগেই পার্টিশনের একটা এক্সপিরিয়েন্স ছিল, আজকে 2020-তে বসে আরো দুটো জেনারেশন চলে যাওয়ার পর we will not receive the story in the same way. So there comes the question of reception. কোন টাইমে বসে রিসিভ করছি আমি জিনিসটা, and কে রিসিভ করছে, you will not relate if you like, or rather I would not say that you will not relate, but your experience of relating the story to yourself will be very different. Some will relate it directly to his breathing, to his experiences, to his memories that have been given to him by his family or his forefathers, and some will relate it like, এটা তো আমার experience না, but it's a nice story, but it was experienced by a friend of mine, like that. আমার ওই বন্ধুটা বলেছিল ওর ঠাকুমার সাথে এরকম হয়েছে, বা আমার ওই বন্ধুটা বলেছে ওদেরও একটা বাড়ি ছিল বাংলাদেশে, ওরা মাঝে মধ্যে যেত, বাট এটা আমার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স না, ইটস দেয়ার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স. So these things are new historical approach, that how you relate to the context, how you think that the context is, the context is not permanent, and on the other hand the context is intertextual. Why the context is intertextual? Because when you consider partition, you do not consider it only on the basis of this story. এই যে যেমন আমরা দিব্যেন্দু পালিতের ন্যারেটিভের সঙ্গে মানিক বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়ের ন্যারেটিভের এই যে এতক্ষণ ধরে একটা আলোচনা করলাম, কোথায় ন্যারেটিভ দুটো এত আলাদা, এই যে আলোচনাটা কেন বললাম, তার মানে কি আমি এটাকে, এই পার্টিশনটাকে অন্য একটা এক্সপিরিয়েন্সের সঙ্গে রিলেট করে দিলাম, তার মানে একটা ইন্টারটেক্সচুয়াল একটা কনসিডারেশন হলো না। কার লাগবে না মাথা যন্ত্রণা, সরি। So that is the thing, you cannot just relate it with your own text only. You have to consider other text. And is it only the literary text that you consider? No, non-literary texts are to be considered as well. Like, ওই টাইমে বসে যদি কোনো টেক্সট লেখা হয় বা গল্প, কবিতা, নাটক লেখা হয়, যেটা সেই অর্থে প্র্যাকটিক্যালি লিটারারি টেক্সট নয়। এবার লিটারারি টেক্সট, নন লিটারারি টেক্সট কোনটাকে বলবো? লিটারারি টেক্সট বলতে যেটাকে আমরা সেই অর্থে সাহিত্য হিসেবে ধরি, বাট দেন again you take an interview and note it down, then it is, সেই অর্থে it is not a literary text. But that interview, I have so many books full of interviews from the people who lived partition, because I am researching on that. And for me, these non-literary sources are very important. And then again, movies by Hrithik Ghosh. You cannot say these are literary texts, but these are also texts. Movies are also texts. Nowadays, movies, even at time, a thing can be considered as a text. So, this is the thing, the way you look upon it, the volatileness of time, the approach, the different approach. So when you read these stories, you have to take all these things into considerations. Okay, so আজকের এই এক্সপ্লেনেশনটা ভালো লাগলো কি বেসিক হিসাবে, যে কোনগুলো মাথায় রেখে আমরা পড়বো? हाँ
सर कुछ क्वेश्चंस हैं,
हाँ
पूछें?
बोलो, अभी अभी क्वेश्चन के लिए ही ओपन हो रहे हैं हम, बोलो।
सर आप बोले ना 1947 में दिव्येंदु पालित जी का 8 ईयर हो रहा है, तो वो भी तो एक डायरेक्ट एक्सपीरियंस ही ना कर रहे हैं पार्टीशन का।
अभी अभी तू बोल, मुझे तुझे याद है 8 साल में तूने क्या क्या किया था?
सर थोड़ा बहुत हल्का हल्का।
थोड़ा बहुत हल्का हल्का याद है, लेकिन तू कल क्या कर रहा है, परसों क्या कर रहा है, और अभी 2 साल पहले क्या किया था, तुझको पूरा याद है ना?
हाँ
अभी तुम जब 10 साल बाद भी तुमको ये 15 से 25 का टाइम याद रहेगा, क्या क्या किए थे तुमको याद रहेगा, लेकिन 8 साल के एक्सपीरियंस तुमको याद नहीं रहेगा, क्योंकि practically you are not experienced enough to understand what is happening around you. Okay, so that's why we form the memory of our toddler as per we are narrated by our guardians, by our parents. तुमने ये किया था, तुमने वो किया था, हम उसको अपने मेमोरी में बिठा लेते हैं, क्योंकि हमको मालूम होता है आसपास का वो चीज़ कैसे दिखती थी। तो अगर वो लोग बोलते हैं तुमने वहाँ जाके ये किया था, हम उसको मेमोरी में देखते हैं, शायद उस दिन हम वो कपड़ा नहीं पहने थे, बट ये मेमोरी में आता है कि हम शायद ये किए थे। Okay, these experiences are given experiences, imposed experiences, or I would not say imposed, but rather these are influenced memories. Okay,
ओके सर। सर और एक क्वेश्चन था,
हाँ बोल।
आप बोले ना कि वो जो रिसीवर जो होता है वो अगर डिफरेंट क्लास में होगा तो अलग अलग तरह से लेगा, तो उसी तरह क्या जेंडर भी चेंज रहने से प्रॉब्लम हो सकता है ना, मतलब अलग तरह से लेंगे ना?
हाँ हो तो सकता है, the thing, the way partition affected the men, it didn't affect the women in that way. Two things I would like to mention. It's a very interesting question. The men, they were brutally tortured. Thrashed, they were killed. But the women, they were sexually harassed. The very concept, I was reading about the partition narratives. The very concept, our middle class society, let me tell you a very different observation of mine. Not directly related to your context, but it may seem to you very interesting. I was working on a paper where I wanted to relate the Brotokotha narratives with partition. And there, one major thing occurred, that religion is giving you a stereotype of what men and women should be, or how do they wear dresses, how do they rather divide the works, and what are the duties of the men, what are the duties of the women. Religion or religious scriptures, even narratives like Protokotha, they clearly conform to that. And in our Bengali families, since long, uh, it has been a tradition that, or rather, not only in Bengali families, I would say in our Hindu families, it has been a tradition that, or in Indian context, even you cannot just exclude the Muslims. In Indian context, it has been a tradition that men will be the bread earner, they will give the security to the family, and the women will do the household work, they will stay inside. Men will enjoy all the external freedoms, and women will, if the women are, the very pathetic situation is women are not to be allowed freedom. And if a woman is free, then only then she can do whatever she wants. A man doesn't need to be allowed to be free. The women need to be allowed to be free. That is the very pathetic question since now. हम जब भी बोलते हैं, हम बोलते हैं তোমাকে এত স্বাধীনতা দিয়েছি তাও তুমি এরকম বলছো। Why, who are you to give a woman freedom? She herself has the right to be free. We do not consider it in that way still now. So you can understand what happened during 1947. The women were all insiders behind the curtain. 1 minute, just 1 minute. হ্যাঁ বলো বলো কি কে কি বন্ধ আছে? কাকে বলবো? তোমার মাকে ফোন করো, আমি ক্লাস নিচ্ছি। কাকে ফোন নাম্বার পাঠাবো? ও আমি বাবু, বাবুর ফোন নাম্বার দাঁড়াও 1 মিনিট। ওকে, give me a minute. I'm just returning within. হ্যাঁ, হ্যালো, শুনতে পাচ্ছিস?
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
okay, just where was I? তো আমাকে মনে করো কি বলছিলাম।
तो जेंडर के बारे में बोल रहे थे।
So I was talking about gender. So yes, so this was the gender stereotype. The men will give security, and that's why, and the women will be there to take care of the men. They will pray for the men only. You can understand that जब भी कोई व्रत लगता है घर में, स्वाति, you do the व्रत, है ना? घर में होता है ना? हेलो।
Yes, sir.
अब कोई पूजा वगैरह और कोई व्रत अगर घर में होता है तो किसके लिए पूजा होता है? पापा के लिए, भाई के लिए होता है ना?
हाँ, हाँ,
कभी 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 मम्मी के लिए हुआ है कुछ?
नहीं,
तुम्हारे लिए कुछ हुआ है कभी?
मेरे लिए अभी तक बचपन में
अभी
हुआ होगा, अभी तो कुछ नहीं।
अभी अभी तो कुछ नहीं। तो
नहीं,
भाई के लिए होता है, भाई दूज होता है, पापा के लिए होता है,
भाई
करवा
नहीं है,
चौथ का, करवा
भाई
चौथ
नहीं
का
है
व्रत
सर।
होता है। ठीक है, लेकिन अगर होता तो भाई के लिए कुछ होता, भाई दूज होता।
हाँ,
अगर अगर
यस,
अगर पापा के लिए करवा चौथ का व्रत लगता है ना, मम्मी करते हैं।
यस सर।
So think about this. So you have it in your family yourself. You can look at this, that the women, they are praying for the men because the men will provide them security. And what happened during partition was that that very stereotype, broke, because the women found that the people, the men in their community, uh, single-handedly were fragile against a group of men from the different community. They could not provide security to the women at all. On the other hand, the male of the other community, they are no longer giving security to you, rather they are a risk to you. So men during partition riots, what happened was that the men who will give security, as a matter of fact, is no question. The, the men will no longer give security to you. On the other hand, the women, they started coming out because they thought that now we have to take care of ourselves. And that's what you can see in the final solution. The man is no longer effective in procuring for the family, and the wife have to come out. Even at the end, the sister-in-law, she is ready to come out and stand on the road, while the husband is very reluctant. Yes, the thing is that the situation demanded that the men were just crushed. They had no jobs. Somehow, coming out on the road, this could be done by the men also, and do anything. But these men will not do anything, quote unquote. They were also very much considering about their social status, how or where they belong to, or rather, সব কাজ আমরা করতে পারবো না. This type of thing. So many things were there. And ultimately, or whatever, কাজ পাচ্ছে না, কাজ করতে পারছে না, whatever, they were practically ineffective. And the effective part had to be taken by these women. And অনেক বছর আগে থেকে in Bengal or in India, we have so many people, so many women rather, working and earning or doing some things which or practically stepping into the domains which were meant for the men only. But those were all exceptions. If you look at the number, but after partition, this no longer were the exception. They started coming out of the house because then they, and mostly from those families which were lower middle class or at least poor. If some had education, they were doing jobs for the educated in government sectors, in offices, and if they didn't have that, they would do the job that required physical labor. Not always prostitution, I would say. Sometimes working at others' houses mail, sometimes working as laborers. So you can understand the way the stereotype was being broken. So that's how, partition comes in different way to, or partition comes to affect the different genders in different way. The concept that men would protect the society practically crushed during partition, and women started coming out. Women started coming out of their house, and they started to find source of incomes because they knew that they were brutally affected in two ways. First, mentally, then physically, and also economically. Women, ছেলেদের খালি মেরে ছেড়ে দেওয়া হতো, মহিলাদের সঙ্গে রেপ করা হচ্ছে, টর্চার করা হচ্ছে, তাদের সোশ্যালি, and how reservations affected the society. Once you were raped, you were outside the society without having anything to do of yourself. তোর নিজের জন্য তোর রেপ হচ্ছে না, but once you were raped, you were outside the society. So now women found that the society was doing an injustice to them. The society was utterly patriarchal society. and therefore they thought that they needed to get themselves educated, or they needed to earn for the family as well. They needed to take a stand where the family would no longer consider about the piousness, quote unquote, sotitto of the women. Once you are in the road, you are earning for your family through prostitution. The husband is in no situation to consider the sanity of your body. And what is the sanity of the body? Why is it needed after all? The husband is not considering about, or in no situation to consider about the sanity of the body. Think about it, it was like a protest. On the other hand, you know, the rape victims, they were thrown out. They were thrown away outside the society. You know, they turned mad. They were not accepted by the family. And on the other hand, those who took the profession of prostitution, they fed their family. So that is the thing, the situation and its effect. Female employment grew decisively, you know. Okay, so Vishal, you understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now anyone else, anything else? আর কারোর কোনো কোয়েশ্চেন আছে?
No, sir.
Okay, so you understood the context, যে কনটেক্সটটা ধরে আমরা আলামস ওন হাউস পড়ব, ঠিক আছে? বুঝা গেল?
Yes, sir.
এর পরের দিন আমরা টেক্সটটা ডাইরেক্ট পড়ব, হ্যাঁ?
Okay,
ওকে,
sir.
এইবার একটা কাজ কর, মেসেজ বক্সে যারা যারা আছিস তোদের নামগুলো টাইপ করে দে, আর কে একটা বেরিয়ে গেল তার নামটাও টাইপ করে দে। কে বেরিয়ে গেছে রে?
সঞ্চিতা।
হ্যাঁ, ওর নামটাও টাইপ করে দে মেসেজ বক্সে, যে কোনো একজন, 5 জনের নাম টাইপ করে দে, 6 জনের नाम। स्वाति, मैसेज बॉक्स में टाइप कर दो बेटी, ठीक है?
ओके ओके सर।
तो इसमें अटेंडेंस भी हो जाएगा। और क्लास में अच्छा लगा सबको? सब अभी সবাই একটুখানি সবার মুখগুলো দেখি, তো সবার মুখগুলো দেখি। ओके, कहाँ पे चला गया? ताजिबुल हक चला गया। ওকে, এবার একটু সবার মুখগুলো দেখি, কতদিন দেখিনি তোদের। সঞ্চিতা রুদ্র, হ্যাঁ সঞ্চিতা রুদ্র ছিল। ওকে, এই তো দেখা যাচ্ছে। এই তুহিনা আরো রোগা হয়ে গেছে, দিন দিন খালি রোগা হয়ে যাচ্ছে। মেয়েটা খাওয়া দাওয়া করবে না, চোখের তলায় কালি পড়ে গেছে। হ্যাঁ, তাজিবুল কেমন আছিস বাবু?
হ্যাঁ স্যার ভালো আছি।
এই তোর পেছনে কি রে, ওগুলো গল্পের বই নাকি রে?
না দাদার ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং।
ও, দাদার ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং এর বই। দাদা কি পড়াশোনা করছে এখনো, না হয়ে গেছে?
কমপ্লিট হয়ে গেছে ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং।
কমপ্লিট হয়ে গেছে, এখন কি চাকরি করছে নাকি?
না না, এটা অনেক দূরে পোস্টিং দিয়েছিল বলে এখন সরকারি চাকরি করছে, ট্রেনিং নিচ্ছে।
খুব ভালো।